I feel like there's a line somewhere which I have is that you build as a product but sell as a service. What does that mean, right? So the way I interpret that is you should have something that is prepackaged and repeatable with zero incremental cost of build, right? That's what makes it a product, especially if it's a
Yep.
SaaS product, then there should be literally zero incremental cost for every new widget you sell. However, the experience should be so awesome that the user of that product should feel like it's a white glove
There's
VIP service. Okay.
absolutely.
That is the bar. That is the high bar you should have. Then there is a higher probability of success.
Welcome to the From Spaghetti to Growth podcast. I'm your host, Seema Alexander, a business growth strategist and advisor and creator of the unique method. In each episode, I have unfiltered conversations with successful founders, CEOs, and experts where we delve into their business journeys of how they went from chaos to growth and everything in between. If you're an entrepreneur seeking inspiration, tips, and strategies to take your business to the next level and turn your spaghetti into growth, this is the podcast for you. Now let's start growing. Hey, Grow Tribe, I have some exciting news for you. I know if you're listening into this podcast, you are seeking strategies to grow your business, to have your breakout years. Right now, the applications for the Disruptive CEO Business Growth Academy are open. www.disruptive.ceo/accelerator. Go to the website, apply, and become part of the Growth Tribe. I'm going to take you in a 10-week journey to change the way that you approach business, to get you clear on your unique positioning in the market and disrupt the status quo so that you can exponentially grow. This is the clarity that you've been seeking. I'm telling you, don't miss out on this opportunity right now. Go to www.disruptive.ceo/accelerator and apply today. Aditya Khurjekar, a seasoned yet pragmatic entrepreneur with 2 exits under his belt, is a Fintech pioneer. He led Medici Global, previously known as Let's Talk Payments, a startup that was recognized as the world's premier hub for Fintech insights and was instrumental in driving Money 2020 to its position as the world's largest Fintech conference. Now at Proof, Aditya is breaking new ground, spearheading a cutting-edge intersection of AI and digital identity. Welcome to today's episode of the From Spaghetti to Growth podcast. I'm Seema Alexander, your host, and I am so excited to bring our next guest on, Aditya Khurjekar. Aditya, nice to see you finally. I can't wait to share more of our connection and our story with these guests, but nice to see you here. How are you doing today?
To be here, and thank you for inviting me, Sima.
Of course, of course. So in this podcast, Aditya, we spend a lot of time going into the personal journeys of entrepreneurs, getting unfiltered stories of what it took to go from the chaotic beginnings to, the success and everything in between. What I appreciate about this conversation, and so there's a mix of the types of guests who listen into this podcast, but you have a corporate background and you've gone through a couple iterations of different businesses. And at this point, you've also exited a business and are working on a startup right now, or maybe in growth mode startup. So I think this is going to be a really fun journey to talk about. But my first question with all my guests is, what was that initial driver for you to start a business? Where did that come from for you?
The answer is probably not as glamorous as you might expect. It came mostly from maybe 2 things, right? I was very fortunate, even though I was working in big companies, I was fortunate to be allowed to be entrepreneurial within the companies. So I had tasted what it meant to push the limits, to break the rules, to get shit done without being bound by structure and process. So I had tasted blood, and once you taste that, you want more, right? And I felt like I couldn't get enough of it staying within the corporate environment, and I decided to take the plunge.
That's a great point. So you had tasted entrepreneurship before you felt the realities of entrepreneurship and the excitement around it. But maybe just spend a minute or two on that background. You said you were in, bigger positions in big corporate companies. What did that look like initially before you took the plunge?
If if I could say something before I answer your question, Gosima, because I
Sure.
think it's important for people to realize the importance of what you are doing. You've been very kind introducing me and inviting me here, but and this is kind of related to the corporate versus entrepreneurial journey. There's a lot of material, lot of resources, lot of great work done in management and what people call leadership within big companies, right? There's a lot of consultants and academic work done in that space. But the reality is that our economy today is driven by small businesses, young companies, entrepreneurs. The early stage ecosystem is thriving, and there isn't enough support for founders from the academic world, from formal training. You go get an MBA, it doesn't teach you to be a good founder. So I want to commend you for doing this. I want to commend you for spending the time. And what you are doing here for the ecosystem is invaluable, Seema. Let me just start with that. So
I appreciate
again,
that.
this is important work. It's important work.
Thank you. Thank you. But let's get into it now because the actual value comes from the founders that I interview. So please share. Please share.
So I think you wanted me to talk about kind of the initial steps, what that felt like.
Yeah.
Is that
Initial steps, like where were you when you said you were in corporate jobs? Because look, I came from corporate. I had 13 years before I made the plunge, right? And so what you mentioned was you were in executive roles. You also felt this like a lot of people feel a lot more structure in corporate America. And so there's a reason to move. You had a little bit of a different, it is hard when you're in these big positions to take a plunge when you're making money and doing the things, you know?
yeah.
So a little bit of that story would be helpful in sort of what was that true leap for you and what did it take to
Well,
move to
look,
the
this is very personal, and it is very different for different people. I have to acknowledge the support and the sacrifices that people around you make for you to have the luxury of being an entrepreneur, right? If it weren't for my wife, who said to me, you know what, take the plunge, I have a paycheck coming, we can still support the family. We had just moved into, a new home, a new baby was born, and for me to take the plunge was not a decision I could have made, no matter how much, you know, how motivated I might be. You have to be pragmatic at the same time, right? And I cannot, I cannot highlight that enough. That being a founder is not a solo thing. It is always a family thing. If there isn't a significant other, there is still a support structure that gives you the confidence to do it, right? So I think that is the first thing I want to say. And there are a lot of people who you see in the corporate world who will be frustrated, who will, have tasted the blood, like I said, who will have the skills to do it, but are not able to do it. Now, some of them are not able to do it because they don't have the courage to take the plunge. And some
right.
of them cannot do it because they don't have the support structure, right? So what I'm emphasizing there is that I see this with a lot of gratitude that I was able to do it. It's
Mm,
not enough to have the capability. You have to have ability and the support to do it. The other thing I also want to say, I mean, for kind of that context is that look, you don't have to be outside a big company to be entrepreneurial. You absolutely don't. You can stay within a big company and still do great things. And I think it's again, what is it that drives you, right? Is it important for you to build things? Is it important for you to not have a boss? Is it important for you to do things that haven't been done before? Right? You have to ask yourself what is important for you. And the reality is that inside or outside a big company, you always have a boss. Okay. You always need a mentor. You you absolutely cannot do anything by yourself inside or outside. And I think that realization is very important. So I don't know if I'm answering your question here, but for me, the plunge was possible, like I said, because I had a wife who was fully supportive. Two, I had encouragement from other founders who had done it before. They said to me, look, you can do it. Okay. Three, I had the motivation, I had the memories. Again, I'm getting a little personal again.
I hope so.
I
Keep bringing it
remember
personal.
I remember a conversation with my dad when I was in high school, probably, where and my dad worked for a big bank his whole life, and he had friends who were entrepreneurs, right, who ran small businesses, and who would always say to me that, "Look, I know you're going to work hard just like me because it's in our blood to work hard, but you should really think about working for yourself because you can do so much more with that hard work if you're working for yourself as opposed to working for somebody else. And that piece of advice, it took me until the age of 40 to actually execute on that advice, right? But I had not forgotten those words. So, different people will have different reasons to take the plunge. But I'll say, well, one more thing, one mistake I made. When I took the plunge, I didn't burn any bridges, but I could have uh, built a more pragmatic bridge between the world I left and the world I was going to. Okay. It doesn't always have to be a true plunge where you're leaving everything behind, right? Especially today, there is enough entrepreneurial energy within companies that you will be able to get the support of your current employer to be able to do something on your own and have that little bit of that support structure from the place you're leaving. So
Well, I wanna add something there because
yeah,
it wasn't like that when I was, in my corporate days. I left Prudential, which was a great company. I stayed there 13 years, but at that time, almost like you had 2 identities was the reality when you're doing a side hustle while being in a business, especially one that is regulated and has a lot of compliance associated. But I agree with you in terms of what is shifted. The
yeah,
companies are much more progressive and open to it, especially if you're trying to create solutions for them, but also, people know from a human resources and retention perspective, to
yeah.
make sure people are aligned to what they really want to do and are passionate about. So,
Times have changed. Yeah, the company I left, that company is very different today than it was when I left that company. So you're absolutely right.
yeah. So I want to jump because you have got so much history post corporate, right? And one of the ways that you and I met was your passion for what was going on in the fintech space at that time. So maybe walk us through because, as an entrepreneur or taking that leap, the fintech was new at that time, right? So how did you get involved? How did you find the big problem and what did you go after first?
So I wish I could say that I had a blueprint and a roadmap for what I would do after I left the big company. I did, right? I literally took the plunge. I did not have a plan. Again, I don't recommend people doing that. I think you should have a plan. But I did not have a plan. And I got lucky in my first venture. I was approached by a couple of folks who had built conferences before, and they invited me to become a co founder of a conference. This was my non compete year after leaving the big company. And I said, hey, if I'm building a conference, I'm not competing with anybody. So, it allows me to still stay in the ecosystem and do something that I haven't done before. Now, I did not know anything about conferences. Okay. But guess what? We built the world's largest fintech conference, Money 2020. And it became successful in the first year itself and was sold in just 2 years. Right. So I call it a happy accident in my life. Here's why I say accident, right? It's not that we didn't work hard. Of course we worked hard. Of course, we had done it thoughtfully. Of course, we leaned on our networks and the ecosystem that we grew up in to make it a meaningful place for people to spend their time and money. But what I'm emphasizing here is the luck factor.
Mhm.
If there's one thing that people should always remember is even if you do everything right, the universe can take it away from you. In the case of May 2020, we had our event 1 week before Hurricane Sandy. Imagine what
Wow.
would happen if Hurricane Sandy had happened that week. Here's my point: we had a fantastic outcome. I had a fantastic first venture as a founder, and we weren't even calling it fintech then. We were calling it money, right? Money 2020.
Right.
I had spent my time in mobile payments, then built this conference soared, 2014, and fintech was a buzzword, right? Everybody was putting fintech in their LinkedIn profiles. And the irony was that most of those folks couldn't exactly describe what fintech meant. And I said, hold on, this is something we need to really shape. What is this word fintech? So my second venture, we took it upon ourselves to really define what does fintech mean. And we didn't do it in an academic way by writing a white paper. We did it by publishing content and research every day, as you know, and as you saw, bit by bit by bit, and over a span of 10 years, we literally built out the ontology, the taxonomy of fintech as a word. So people now understand, it took us a few years, what is fintech?
Let's go back to the conference because just to put perspective, right? We're in this industrial revolution again with Web3 and what's happening with AI and blockchain and NFTs and DAOs. We can keep going, right? And so you were in that place when money pre fintech word was, something that was starting to occur. So you guys found, hey, there's no one talking about this in a large way.
Yeah.
And you created a conference for the masses. Most of the time, conferences are a loss leader. Okay. So, can you just spend a second there, kind of talking this audience through, how did you make it profitable? How did it become this big thing when it was so new? And from your background, you shared you didn't even have conference experience, although you had relationships and connections. So, maybe share that, and then I want to go into a couple other things you mentioned.
You know, I tell you this, I feel like people get carried away by the wrong buzzwords, right? And the wrong metrics. I'll give some examples of wrong metrics, and then the right ones will be obvious. Amount of money raised is a wrong metric. Valuation is a wrong metric in the early days, right? You know what logos you have on the resume, be it school or companies, is not important. What is important in a business is being able to make a profit, have revenues, high quality revenues, and have a team, both internal as well as people around you, right? Where the vision is aligned. That is important. So to answer your question, even though it was our first year conference, we did not compromise on the quality of the product, right? And here again, you'll say, what is a product in a conference? Content is part of the product. Quality of the speakers is part of the product. The food you serve is a part of the product. Ambience in the hallway is a part of the product, right? To give you an example, the level of detail we went into, we had a custom soundtrack that we recorded and played in the halls of the area during the conference. Every speaker who walked up on stage, we had that speaker's favorite music, favorite song being played when they walked up the steps.
You gotta hype up the speakers. I love that. Little nuances matter.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we didn't compromise on the size either. It was 350 speakers, 75 sessions, 3 days, 10 tracks. Okay.
So 2 questions.
Yeah.
How about, because in those moments, and then we're gonna move to the next, but sponsorship is so critical. So, being a new conference like that, give us some, some tips on how you gained, a significant amount of sponsorship for an early conference.
Is relationships and trust. Okay. And, you have to put everything out there, right? You have no history. It's the first year. And you've got to basically say, look, you've done business with me. How long do you know me? Trust me.
Mhm.
It's going to be a good use of your time and money, right?
Yeah.
And we said to ourselves, we're going to build a conference that we ourselves would love going to. Okay. And you'll find it surprising, right? People give away complimentary passes. Guess how many complimentary passes we gave?
How many?
0.
Oh, wow.
Back to your first question. If you believe in your product, you cannot be shy about asking people to pay for it.
Wow, that's amazing. And that is such a common practice in conferences in general. So the fact that you did not, and I think the other really important thing, because you have co-founders, it's not just you. And you mentioned that you guys had an aligned vision. And I think that is so critical for the audience to hear too, because when you're working with not just you and you have one or two other partners, that is such an important exercise, or else you're always going to be competing against what's important and how you deliver on it.
And look, uh, I did not do my next company with them because after the conference, our visions did not align. And nothing wrong with it.
Sure.
Nothing wrong with it. I wanted to take it a certain way, and my co-founder wanted to take it a certain other way. And we said, you know what? No, it's okay. We don't align, right? And that's perfectly fine. But my point about alignment of vision is not just for a conference or within your team, also with your customers. So, and it could be any business, right? If you are trying to sell something to somebody, that person is going to give you money only if that person believes that what you are giving them is going to create new opportunity for both of us. And for that, you have to believe that yes, the sun will rise tomorrow. Yes, the stock market will go up. Yes, the sky will always be blue. If you're not aligned on that, you cannot have a transaction.
You're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. The other thing, and this will go into let's talk payments, right? Content. So you mentioned it as one of your strongest pillars at the conference. And today, if you listen to people like Gary Vaynerchuk and so many others, content it will always be king, queen, and everything else, but it's about adding value. So now you moved from a conference format and you started your own company called Let's Talk Payments, which my understanding was the number one blog in the fintech industry. It hit 1 million followers the first year. Is that right?
Not the first year, it took us a little bit more, but
Okay.
we were the number one blog, I think for 2 or 3 consecutive, years. And yes, we were all about content. We published a lot of content. In hindsight, maybe too much content, a lot of learnings, right? And, even though now I can say that, we were lucky with the conference. The confidence that you get from a success, you got to temper that confidence and always ask yourself how much of that was luck and good timing versus something that is definitely repeatable. And the second venture, let's talk payments. It took me much longer to get the exit, right? And so, I would say we were, if you look at the average lifespan of a startup, we were pretty much the average. Like it took us 7, 8 years. That is how long startups take, anyways. But back to the content question, we did Let's Talk Payments one on the back of having done May 2020, and I had personally curated the speaker faculty and the agenda for May 2020. So I had that confidence. And on the other hand, we were seeing big content brands at the time like GigaOM and others going bust. But we still did it because we believed that the fintech world needed, the payments world needed thought leadership. Thought leadership is another very overused word, but that's what we took upon ourselves. I still remember I had friends who would tell me, "You are taking on a very difficult problem," right? And there's a line that he keeps saying, or at least at the time he kept saying to me, is that just because the problem is hard doesn't mean it's worth solving. And I disagreed with that. I said, no, the reason I'm solving the problem is exactly because it's a hard problem. So again, you got to look into yourself and see what is it that you're looking for from the founder experience. Every person is going to have a different view.
So how did you make money in a content company? How does that work?
Again, you have to not give things away for free. So back to the thing I said about the conference, I did not take my own advice, right? In hindsight, again, in hindsight, we probably gave away content for free for too long. We waited too long to put a paywall on our content and monetize it. And again, there's different schools of thought. But in hindsight, if we had started offering our inner circle subscription, which you know all about, because you were helping us with that confidence to, hey, start charging for awesome things. We should have done it earlier, right? Anyways, my point is again, content or any product, we should not be shy about asking people to pay for it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So let's go into that for a few minutes in terms of moving from Let's Talk Payments. You went through a repositioning exercise and went to Medici Global. So maybe share what happened. What was that inflection point that you said, you know what, we're no longer just content, we're more than that. What did that look like and what was the process there?
We were helping all kinds of folks in the ecosystem with the content we're publishing, right? And when we started, people would call us the McKinsey of payments because we were giving away free content and then we were doing advisory work to help people get their company sold or, have a strategy or what have you. And that's how we were making money. We also realized that a lot of investors, VCs, were using our content to make investment decisions, right? We had founders coming to us say, hey, I pivoted a company based on the content I read or that I read. Okay. We had bank and insurance companies coming to us and saying, hey, we want to establish an accelerator or an incubator focused on fintech. Can you help us find companies? So we found ourselves literally in the middle of two or three or five different types of stakeholders who are benefiting
Hmm.
from our content. And I said to myself, hold on, we are adding far more value to the ecosystem than we are getting credit for or that we are monetizing. So
Hmm.
let us change the model to have more confidence in monetizing the various aspects of value that we're adding to the ecosystem. That was the big pivot.
Yeah, and this is really important again to listen in. Where you start is never where you end up. I say it all the time. There's, this concept of repositioning is analyzing at inflection points of like not only who you are today, but who do you serve best and like who is seeking you out and for what, right? And so what I heard from you, Aditya, is that you guys went through this phase of we're bigger than content. Our content is actually being leveraged in so many different ways. How do we start to productize those services and be
Yes,
known for that in the marketplace?
absolutely, absolutely. And I feel like there's a line somewhere in which I have my line is that you build as a product but sell as a service. What does that mean, right? So the way I interpret that is you should have something that is prepackaged and repeatable with zero incremental cost of build, right? That's what makes it a product, especially if it's a
Yep.
SaaS product, then there should be literally zero incremental cost for every new widget you sell. However, the experience should be so awesome that the user of that product should feel like it's a white glove
There's
VIP service. Okay.
absolutely.
That is the bar. That is the high bar you should have. Then there is a higher probability of success. There's no guarantee.
Yeah. I talk about this all the time, this concept of packaging your intelligence, right? And
Yes.
so if you're in the service-based industry, how do you create a framework, a method, a truly a service product that you can do consistently that comes to the
Yes.
same outcome so that you become scalable and sought after for it? And to your point, I really like that additional nuance around the making sure the experience feels white labeled. So no matter what you do with the client, it's personalized and they don't feel like this is a cookie cutter approach because that's
That's
not
right.
what makes you unique and different, right? And
That's right.
stands
And,
out.
and I believe that's what you're doing with your unique framework, right? I
Yeah,
think I think it's important to have the repeatability because then it is easier for both parties, right? It's easier for you to get the message across consistently, right? And it's easier for the person to consume it because then they don't feel like they are taking a chance on something that hasn't been done before, right? So
absolutely.
it works both ways.
So how did it work to re-communicate who you are in the marketplace, right? When you were rebranding, it wasn't just a
Yeah.
repositioning. So what were some best practices that you had and some learnings that you can share?
Look, it's a big decision to rebrand. It is something that you should do very thoughtfully. There are always pros and cons. I can tell you the cons about rebranding from Desktop Payments to Medici first, right? And again, part of the mistakes you make, and in hindsight, they're like, duh, how stupid I was. Even today, just last week, I'm on a call with the VC, and he has a conference for Medici Network or something. So the Medici name word is so old;
Yes.
it's been around for hundreds of years and different people use it in different ways. And so in hindsight, if we had been clear about our product within the name itself, I might have saved some selling cycles. If you're selling tires, it is better to call your company, I don't know, Apollo Tires as opposed to just Apollo, right? So those are some of the mistakes. But again, you're always able to recover from mistakes. It's not like when you make a mistake, you die. No, you're able to recover from mistakes. Positive though was that we were able to stay outside a box because the thing about fintech was that it wasn't just payments, it wasn't just lending, it wasn't just blockchain, it was so many different things. Okay. And we wanted the flexibility of being able to adapt to how the fintech world was evolving. Even today, it continues to evolve, especially as fintech and crypto are now going to merge. The intersections are fascinating, right? So,
Yeah.
advantage of having a word like Medici was that we could evolve as the world evolved. Anyways, I think the notion of rebranding is not just about the word. Obviously, it's about the value proposition. It's about back to what is it that you believe in as a brand. And we spend a lot of time on that, right? We had to let the world know that this is what we stand for. This is the mission. This is the impact we think we will make by doing what we're doing. We believe in inclusion. We believe in solving societal problems because fintech is the means to do that. And that's the reason why we are talking about fintech at scale. You probably remember that line. So I think putting yourself out there and telling your story and the reason you're building the company or the product, that's what gets people to you. So very important to do that when you're rebranding.
Yeah, and I think I want to make a point here. Rebranding is not a branding exercise only. This is a strategic exercise,
Yes.
right? And I always say it's working on your business the right way, right? Versus working in your business and really starting to own, who you are, what you do best, and how you do it uniquely and differently. And then now here's an opportunity to step back and say, how do we want to be seen and positioned in the marketplace? Which again, when people think branding, they think logo and
Yeah.
pretty beautiful things, but it's much deeper than that and
Yes.
really important for companies to know. And if you're not sitting there trying to do full rebrands, repositioning is the same exercise. It's just really, going through that same process without changing your name or, those types of things. So, okay. So now you're at, let's talk money goes into Medici Global. And then you ended up selling the company and exiting. So let's get into that part of the story and then where you ended up and how that all happened.
So we sold the company almost 2 years ago now, and I'm now with Proof. It's the company that acquired us. Again, so many learnings. You have to do a transaction, with the conviction that you are doing it for the benefit of both parties. Here's what I mean by that, because as you can imagine, there were investment bankers involved and consultants trying to pitch us things and lawyers and so on. Ultimately, even though I was probably working with two or three different investment bankers, we did this deal ourselves, buyer and seller. Okay, and after the deal, I'm getting questions. I mean, I have two types of investment bankers, right? Wow, well, we didn't expect that. How does it make sense, right? Why would Proof buy a company that does what you did? And I said, you know what? Just wait for the press release. It will be obvious to you. And then there was another group of people who said, oh my God, now it makes sense. I know what you're going to send a press release. A light bulb just went off. Here's my point. There will always be people around you who are so-called experts in that exit process that will tell you what to do, what not to do. Okay.
Mhm.
But go with your conviction. And if you're solving it for both parties, it's a good deal.
It's interesting. I mean, I think that's the theme of this podcast is go with your conviction, go,
Yes.
and go and really, it's interesting when you have a gut feeling about things. But let me just ask you that the conviction is important, obviously, when you have the confidence to do it. But was there any mentorship that really helped you kind of take it to that next phase? Be like, you know what, keep going. Like, because again, you started this conversation around entrepreneurship cannot be done alone, or did you at this point say, "You know what, as the founder, this is what I believe, this is what I know, this is the value proposition, we're doing it this way." Like, what was that
No,
stage look like?
absolutely. Absolutely. I think that's where, look, I mean, conviction doesn't come only from within. Conviction comes from the people around you. Conviction comes from people you talk to. Con- Conviction comes from people whose mentorship you seek. And that's the other learning for me, having done this now for a few years, is that you have to ask for help. And again, that is something I probably didn't start doing soon enough in my entrepreneurial journey, but there are people willing to help. There are people wanting to help, but you have to ask for it. There is no pride in saying, "Hey, I'm a hardworking founder." There's nothing sexy about working hard, right? It's you have to work smart, and you get smarter by seeking advice, seeking help. So yes, and it's a big burden to be a founder or CEO. It is lonely. It is lonely, right?
Yeah.
Very lonely. Even though I had a fantastic co-founder, Amit, it is still very lonely. And especially when you have dozens of livelihoods dependent on your ability to, keep balance in the bank account. You're responsible for those families. So there is a lot of pressure, a lot of stress. All of that is there. And when you're going to an exit, you will always feel like you have to choose between investors and the buyer and founders and employees and then then that's what reveals the true character of a founder. Okay. What are you solving for? Are you solving to maximize investor value? Are you solving to maximize, value for employees? Right. At the end of the day, the buyer is going to give you a check of the size that was defined in the deal. There is always leeway to say, how does the pie get distributed? So my point is, it's a process. It is absolutely not solo. Your support structure is your investors, your employees, your founders, and friends and mentors, and you got to solve it holistically.
Yeah. So, you go into proof now, right? And a lot of times that happens after a company is sold, the founder goes to the other company and has a transition period or something. Is this a transition period for you? Are you building with them? What's that phase look like right now?
It's been a long transition period, although I'm about to now launch a new product, a new business line within the company. We are going to offer an API, which is pretty much going to be the Stripe for identity. One single point integration, self-serve, low code, zero code, so that if you are a website or a mobile app that needs to verify the user coming onto your site, you can do it in a snap. That's
Wow.
the new product I'm about to launch. And essentially it builds upon 15 years of innovation that has already happened in Proof and taking all of that capability and making it available now to everybody. So the same technology that is used by the biggest banks to fight fraud will now be available to the smallest companies, with quick integration. That's why
Wow,
it's
that's
a
huge.
product of the line.
Congratulations. That's a big deal. So you can, I mean, obviously now you're in the company, but you still have the full entrepreneurial rights to do these types of things because you're still innovating. It sounds like it's been like that your entire career up to this point.
It is the only way I can operate now. I don't think I can operate any other way. And trust me, even if it's not a big corporation, we are only a 350-person company, but we are enterprise grade startup. Let's call it that. That's not an easy place to be for a company, right? High growth, rapid growth, high expectations. And so there is obviously, a fair amount of structure and process and compliance that I have to always be mindful of, but
Mhm.
you cannot let that innovation flame die just because you are big. It's very important. I don't think, enterprise grade and innovation, it's not an or, it's an and. You have to be
Sure.
enterprise grade and innovate. That's what makes great companies.
Okay, so now you have this entrepreneurial itch. You're obviously launching products and all that, but what's next for Aditya? What's the future hold?
Well, we have to launch our new API and make it $1 billion business. That's the current plan. I feel like there's many ways to make impact. There's a personal preference you might have that, hey, I want to be, I don't know, in climate tech or sustainability or fintech or what have you. But I think the overarching theme for me is that if I'm creating impact, if I'm making a difference, if I'm solving a problem, I can do it staying within Crew, I can do it outside Crew, I can do it anywhere, right? But there has to be kind of your personal North Star. And if that personal North Star aligns with your company's North Star, then you have a winner. So that's how I see it.
That's amazing. Okay, let me ask you a couple other questions here. If there was a founder today in that spaghetti phase of business, right? What kind of advice would you give them, Aditya?
Wow, that's a loaded question. That's a loaded question. I feel like there's so many different facets to being successful in building a business. But what we talked about earlier, right? Be authentic. Don't don't do it because that's how Mark Zuckerberg does it. I feel there's too many of those cliches out there that, hey, I want to be the Uber of X or I want to be the Steve Jobs of Y. I don't think that's as important as saying that, hey, I believe in this. Here's the way I think I'm going to solve the problem. Here's the way I'm going to approach it, and then just go forward and do it, okay, in your own way. I think that is what will make you successful in the corporate world or the founder world. I don't believe
Mhm.
in a template for a founder success. It is your own way. One, two, be brutally honest with you every step of the way. Because a lot of founder advice, oh, follow your heart, follow your passion, keep pushing, don't give up. You know what? All that sounds nice, but it's impractical.
You
When you
need to have a
start
strategy
seeing
that works.
when you start seeing signs of failure, address the sign. Don't just keep pushing against the brick wall. Doesn't make sense. Address the science and solve the science. It's okay to say I was wrong and I changed course. Nothing wrong with it.
Right.
And again, the last thing I'll say, and again, this is what I said before, have the right KPIs in front of you. At the end of the day, you have to have a very large market. You have to have excellent unit economics, and you have to have a unique way to solve the problem. This is the only formula. It's simple. There's no rocket science.
Simple, right?
There's no rocket science here, right? You have to build a profitable business at the unit level, and you have to be able to replicate that zillions of times. That's a good business.
Yes. Sustainability and scalability comes in exactly the formula that you just shared. So if someone was trying to find you or support you in your growth, where can they find you?
I'm easy to find. I don't know if any other person with the same first and last name as me. So, find find me on LinkedIn. I'm easy to find. If you want to be part of our initial launch of the new API at Proof, send me an email, ak@proof.com. But in general, I'm pretty easy. I'm easy to find.
Awesome. Any last minute words for the audience today?
Look, I just want to say thank you again for inviting me. Thank you for the very thoughtful questions. I think you're doing great work. I'm happy that I could be here and make a contribution to your endeavor. So thank you again.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Aditya. I really, really appreciate you being here and sharing your wisdom with the audience today. So
Thank you.
thank you again.
Bye-bye.
All right. Hello, S2G Tribe, aka Growth Tribe. As an entrepreneur, I know time is currency, and I don't take it lightly that you listened into today's episode of the From Spaghetti to Growth podcast. I hope it added value, and I'm truly honored to be part of your entrepreneurial journey. Be sure to head to disruptive.ceo and the soon-to-be-coming SeemaAlexander.com to grab today's show notes and free resources to uncover opportunities to turn your unique spaghetti into growth. If you found value in today's episode, please rate, comment, and subscribe on your podcast platform and keep listening. Look forward to seeing you on our next episode.